In recent years, the push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, has become a cornerstone of corporate culture in many industries. Spurred by both social movements and government incentives, DEI programs aim to address historical inequities and create more inclusive workplaces. However, these well-intentioned policies have sparked debate, particularly when implemented in conjunction with government subsidies that encourage their adoption. Critics argue that such subsidies can inadvertently create a cascade of negative consequences, from corporate inefficiencies to broader societal issues like unemployment, homelessness, and addiction, ultimately making populations more vulnerable to government control.
You need to hear this if you're a business owner or DEI advocate. Is there a hidden cost to government-backed DEI initiatives? In recent years, DEI programs have transformed corporate culture, driven by social movements and government incentives. These initiatives aim to address historical inequities and foster inclusive workplaces. But what happens when these programs are fueled by government subsidies? Critics argue that such subsidies can lead to unexpected consequences. Think corporate inefficiencies, rising unemployment, and even societal issues like homelessness and addiction. Some say these complications make us more vulnerable to government control. For example, over 84% of S&P 1500 companies tie DEI metrics to executive pay. While diversity can boost financial performance, legal challenges and public backlash are growing. Legislation like the Dismantle DEI Act aims to cut federal DEI funding, sparking heated debates. Are these programs creating positive change or just new problems? Understanding both sides of the argument is key. What do you think? Should government subsidies continue, or is it time to rethink our approach? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thought-provoking insights.
Government subsidies aimed at encouraging DEI initiatives often take the form of tax incentives, grants, or preferential treatment in contracting opportunities. These measures are designed to nudge corporations toward adopting hiring practices and programs that prioritize underrepresented groups. While these policies are rooted in a desire to rectify historical injustices, their implementation has not been without challenges. Tax incentives, for instance, reduce the taxable income of companies that meet certain diversity thresholds, effectively rewarding them for hiring practices aligned with DEI objectives. Grants may be provided to fund training programs, mentorship initiatives, or infrastructure improvements designed to foster inclusivity. Additionally, preferential contracting policies can give companies a competitive edge in bidding for government contracts, provided they demonstrate adherence to DEI guidelines. The push for DEI subsidies has been most pronounced in industries with significant public visibility or influence, such as technology, healthcare, and finance. These sectors often face scrutiny regarding their lack of diversity, making them prime targets for government intervention. Companies in these industries are incentivized to implement sweeping changes in their hiring and promotion practices to meet the standards required for subsidies. However, the criteria for these subsidies can be overly broad or ambiguous, creating challenges in their implementation. For example, diversity thresholds may be defined by arbitrary percentages, such as requiring a certain proportion of leadership roles to be filled by women or members of underrepresented racial or ethnic groups. While these metrics are intended to drive change, they can lead to unintended consequences, such as prioritizing diversity quotas over merit-based hiring. Critics also point to the administrative burden associated with tracking and reporting compliance with DEI requirements. Smaller businesses, in particular, may struggle to allocate resources for such initiatives, leading to uneven participation across industries. This disparity can inadvertently favor larger corporations with the capacity to manage compliance, further entrenching economic inequalities. Another significant issue lies in the potential for checkbox compliance. Companies may focus on meeting the minimal requirements to qualify for subsidies rather than engaging in meaningful change. For instance, a firm might hire a handful of candidates from underrepresented groups to meet diversity quotas without addressing systemic barriers that hinder broader inclusivity. This approach undermines the long-term goals of DEI policies and raises questions about the efficacy of subsidies as a tool for social change. Moreover, the focus on meeting numerical targets can create a perception that hires from underrepresented groups are less qualified, even when this is not the case. This stigma can lead to workplace tensions, where employees question the merit of their peers, a dynamic that can undermine team cohesion and productivity. Finally, the long-term economic implications of DEI subsidies merit scrutiny. By redirecting resources toward compliance with diversity metrics, companies may inadvertently neglect other critical areas, such as innovation, employee development, and market expansion. Over time, this misallocation of resources can erode a company's competitive edge, particularly in global markets where DEI policies may not hold the same prominence. In summary, while government subsidies for DEI initiatives aim to promote fairness and inclusivity, their design and implementation have the opposite effect. Policymakers and corporations ignore the need for operational efficiency and merit-based decision-making to keep the subsidies coming in. Ultimately, the business fails, necessitating a government bailout. Women and minorities take the blame when the reason for failure was corporate adherence to government policies or socialism.
Hey everyone, today I'm diving into the mechanics of government subsidies for diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI initiatives. So, what are DEI subsidies? Essentially, they're financial incentives like tax breaks, grants, or preferential treatment in government contracts aimed at encouraging companies to adopt inclusive hiring practices. The idea is to rectify historical injustices and promote fairness. Now let's talk about the financial mechanisms. Tax incentives reduce taxable income for companies that meet diversity thresholds. Grants can fund training programs or infrastructure improvements. Preferential contracting. It gives a competitive edge to businesses that stick to DEI guidelines. Industries like tech, healthcare, and finance are the primary targets for these subsidies. Why? Because they have significant public visibility and influence. But here's where things get tricky. The criteria for these subsidies can be overly broad or vague. For example, diversity thresholds might require a specific percentage of leadership roles to be filled by women or underrepresented groups. This can lead to focusing on quotas rather than merit. And let's not forget the administrative burden. Tracking and reporting compliance is no small feat, especially for smaller businesses. This often results in only larger corporations being able to manage, further entrenching economic disparities. Another issue? Checkbox compliance. Companies might meet the minimum requirements without driving meaningful change. For instance, hiring a few candidates from diverse backgrounds just to tick a box. This undermines the long-term goals of DEI. Moreover, focusing on numerical targets can create a perception that underrepresented hires are less qualified, even when that's not true. This stigma can harm team cohesion and productivity. Now, let's also consider the economic implications. Redirecting resources to meet diversity metrics can mean neglecting other critical areas like innovation and market expansion, potentially eroding a company's competitive edge. In summary, while DEI subsidies aim to promote fairness, their implementation can sometimes do the opposite. Policymakers and corporations need to balance operational efficiency and merit-based decision-making. Otherwise, businesses may falter, and the blame unfairly shifts to the very groups these policies aim to help. Thanks for watching. If you found this insightful, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into business strategies. Catch you next time.
While DEI policies aim to address systemic inequities, their implementation, particularly when linked to government subsidies, can inadvertently disrupt traditional merit-based hiring practices. The pressure to meet diversity quotas often leads to a focus on demographic characteristics at the expense of qualifications, skills, or experience. This trade-off can have significant ramifications for organizational effectiveness. One prominent example is the technology sector, where expertise and technical acumen are paramount. Companies eager to qualify for subsidies have been found to hire candidates who meet diversity criteria but lack the necessary skills for their roles. This dynamic often results in increased training costs, project delays, and reduced productivity. In one case study, a major investment firm, seeking to qualify for DEI-related tax benefits, adopted aggressive hiring targets for underrepresented groups. Internal audits later revealed that several senior hires lacked the requisite expertise in complex financial instruments. These missteps led to poor investment decisions, resulting in significant losses and a sharp decline in client confidence. The firm's leadership faced backlash from shareholders and was forced to overhaul its hiring practices. Beyond technical skills, the emphasis on meeting diversity metrics can strain workplace dynamics. Employees hired primarily to fulfill quotas may face skepticism from their peers, leading to feelings of inadequacy or stigmatization. This tension can erode team cohesion and morale, particularly in high-stakes industries where collaboration is essential. Moreover, the focus on demographic representation can overshadow other forms of diversity, such as diversity of thought or experience. Critics argue that a narrow interpretation of DEI risks creating a homogeneous culture in terms of ideology or perspective, counteracting the broader goals of inclusivity. To mitigate these challenges, organizations must adopt a balanced approach to DEI that prioritizes qualifications alongside diversity goals. Unfortunately, the purpose of any corporation is to increase shareholder value, and DEI subsidies increase shareholder value by a greater margin than providing real goods and services to customers. Companies will continue to fail as long as shareholder value is dependent on making bad decisions. Eventually, there will be no companies left to practice DEI.
Hey there. Today, I'm diving into a hot topic that's making waves in the business world: diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, policies in hiring. While these initiatives aim to create fairer and more inclusive workplaces, they can sometimes clash with traditional merit-based hiring practices. All right, let's break it down. DEI policies often come with government subsidies, pushing companies to meet diversity quotas. This sounds great in theory, but in practice, it can lead to hiring based more on demographics than on skills or experience. Take the tech sector, for instance. Here, expertise is key. Companies eager for subsidies might hire candidates who fulfill diversity criteria but lack the necessary technical skills. The result? Increased training costs, project delays, and reduced productivity. Let's look at a real-life example. A major financial institution adopted aggressive DEI hiring targets to qualify for tax benefits. But internal audits showed that several senior hires didn't have the expertise needed in complex financial instruments. This led to poor investment decisions, significant losses, and a drop in client confidence. The firm faced backlash and had to completely rethink its hiring practices. Beyond the numbers, the emphasis on meeting diversity metrics constrain workplace dynamics. Employees hired mainly to fulfill quotas might feel inadequate or stigmatized, which can mess with team cohesion and morale, especially in high-stakes industries. And there's another layer to this. Focusing too much on demographic representation can overshadow other crucial forms of diversity, like diversity of thought or experience. Now here's a kicker. The purpose of corporations is to increase shareholder value. DEI subsidies may boost shareholder value more than traditional business efforts, but this isn't sustainable. If companies keep making decisions that prioritize quotas over actual qualifications, they might end up failing altogether. In conclusion, while DEI policies have noble goals, their implementation needs careful consideration to avoid unintended consequences. Balancing DEI with merit-based hiring, fostering genuine inclusivity, and addressing systemic issues are key for long-term success. Thanks for watching.
When companies prioritize DEI metrics over operational effectiveness, the consequences can extend beyond individual hiring decisions, leading to systemic inefficiencies and, in extreme cases, organizational failure. These challenges often manifest in three key areas: leadership, operational performance, and financial stability. The cumulative effect of these challenges extends beyond individual organizations, impacting entire industries and local economies. As companies falter, their employees face layoffs, creating ripple effects that exacerbate unemployment and reduce consumer spending. All of this happens while the board of directors of the corporations get rich off of the subsidies provided in exchange for making bad decisions. A mid-sized technology firm, lauded for its early adoption of DEI initiatives, experienced a significant decline in performance after prioritizing diversity quotas in its engineering department. Projects were delayed due to skill gaps, and the company lost several key clients to competitors. Despite its initial acclaim, the firm eventually filed for bankruptcy, highlighting the potential risks of misaligned DEI policies. The ripple effects of leadership and operational inefficiencies often culminate in financial instability. Companies may face increased costs due to project delays, customer attrition, or regulatory penalties. In severe cases, these challenges can erode investor confidence, leading to declining stock prices or even bankruptcy. The misalignment between hiring practices and job requirements can hinder day-to-day operations. Employees placed in roles for which they are underqualified often require additional training and support, diverting resources from other critical functions. This dynamic can be particularly damaging in industries where precision and expertise are non-negotiable, such as technology, finance, or manufacturing. Filling roles based on diversity metrics has profound implications. Leaders who lack the experience or expertise required for their positions may struggle to navigate complex challenges, resulting in suboptimal strategies and missed opportunities. This dynamic was evident in a healthcare organization that diversified its executive team to meet federal grant requirements. While the initiative secured funding, it also introduced inefficiencies in decision-making, leading to delays in patient care and operational setbacks.
Hey there, business leaders. Let's talk about how misaligned DEI policies can sink companies. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, are crucial for fostering inclusive workplaces, but when companies prioritize DEI metrics over operational effectiveness, it can lead to systemic inefficiencies and even organizational failure. Firstly, leadership challenges. Filling leadership roles based on diversity metrics rather than merit can have profound implications for decision-making. Leaders who lack the necessary experience or expertise may struggle with complex challenges, resulting in suboptimal strategies and missed opportunities. Take, for example, a healthcare organization that diversified its executive team to meet federal grant requirements. While they secured funding, inefficiencies in decision-making led to delays in patient care and operational setbacks. Next, let's talk about operational performance. Misalignment between hiring practices and job requirements can hinder day-to-day operations. Employees placed in roles they're underqualified for often need additional training and support, diverting resources from other critical functions. This can be particularly damaging in industries where precision and expertise are non-negotiable, like technology, finance, or manufacturing. And finally, financial instability. The ripple effects of leadership and operational inefficiencies often lead to financial instability. Companies may face increased costs due to project delays, customer attrition, or regulatory penalties. In severe cases, these challenges can erode investor confidence, leading to declining stock prices or even bankruptcy. Consider a mid-sized tech company that prioritized diversity quotas in its engineering department. Projects were delayed due to skill gaps, and they lost several key clients to competitors. Despite initial acclaim for their DEI initiatives, they eventually filed for bankruptcy. The cumulative effect of these challenges extends beyond individual firms, impacting entire industries and local economies. Layoffs create ripple effects, exacerbating unemployment and reducing consumer spending. In conclusion, DEI policies are essential, but they must be implemented thoughtfully and strategically. By balancing inclusivity with organizational effectiveness, companies can avoid the pitfalls of misaligned DEI policies and achieve sustainable success. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.
The societal repercussions of corporate instability extend far beyond the immediate effects on employees and shareholders. When companies falter due to inefficiencies introduced by misaligned DEI policies, the ripple effects can destabilize entire communities and exacerbate social inequities. The most significant impacts often manifest in rising unemployment, increased homelessness, and growing public health crises. Mass layoffs resulting from corporate failures can flood local job markets with displaced workers, particularly in areas heavily reliant on a single industry. Unemployed individuals face challenges in finding new positions, especially when their skill sets do not align with available opportunities. The longer these workers remain unemployed, the more likely they are to exhaust savings and rely on public assistance programs, placing additional strain on government resources. Unemployment also erodes consumer confidence, reducing spending and further weakening local economies. Small businesses often bear the brunt of this contraction, as they rely on the disposable income of nearby residents to remain afloat. Over time, these economic pressures can lead to a cycle of decline, where shrinking opportunities drive skilled workers to relocate, leaving behind communities with fewer resources and diminished prospects. As shelters and social services become overwhelmed, unsheltered populations grow, creating public health and safety concerns. The visibility of homelessness also impacts community morale, fostering a sense of decline and instability that can deter investment and exacerbate the challenges of recovery. The loss of steady employment often forces individuals and families into precarious housing situations. Without the income necessary to pay rent or mortgages, many face eviction or foreclosure, contributing to rising rates of homelessness. This crisis is particularly acute in urban centers where housing costs are already prohibitively high. Ultimately, corporations and people are left dependent on government handouts. But since those handouts are financed by taxpayer dollars and there are no taxpayers to put dollars into the government, the local economy collapses. The rich elite and politically connected walk away with what was once the total wealth of the community. This dynamic creates a paradox where DEI policies, intended to address systemic inequities, inadvertently contribute to their deepening when implemented poorly. The very populations these initiatives aim to support may find themselves disproportionately affected by the negative consequences of corporate instability. The societal fallout from corporate failures disproportionately affects marginalized groups, exacerbating existing inequalities. Individuals from underrepresented communities often have fewer resources to fall back on during periods of economic hardship, making them more vulnerable to displacement, homelessness, and addiction. The opioid crisis in particular has become emblematic of the intersection between economic hardship and public health challenges. Areas with high rates of unemployment often report disproportionate levels of opioid misuse, further compounding the difficulties faced by affected populations. As economic and social pressures mount, communities often experience a breakdown in cohesion. Local institutions, from schools to community centers, face funding shortfalls as tax revenues decline. This disintegration weakens the social fabric, making it more challenging to mobilize recovery efforts or build resilience against future challenges. Economic instability and housing insecurity often lead to a rise in substance abuse and mental health issues. Research has consistently shown a correlation between unemployment and increased rates of addiction, as individuals turn to drugs or alcohol to cope with stress and despair. These issues place further strain on healthcare systems, particularly in communities already grappling with limited resources.
Hey everyone, today I want to talk about something really important: how corporate failures can wreak havoc on our communities. When big companies go down, it's not just their employees and shareholders who suffer. The impact ripples out, destabilizing entire communities and making social inequalities even worse. Let's start with unemployment. When a company lays off workers, especially in areas dependent on a single industry, the job market gets flooded with people looking for work. If their skills don't match available jobs, they're stuck. These folks burn through their savings, rely on public assistance, and that places a huge strain on government resources. Plus, when people aren't spending money, local businesses suffer. It's a vicious cycle that can lead to skilled workers leaving town, making things even tougher for those left behind. Next, homelessness. Without a steady income, many people can't pay rent or mortgages, leading to evictions and foreclosures. This is a huge issue in cities where housing is already expensive. Overwhelmed shelters and social services can't keep up, and unsheltered populations grow, leading to public health and safety concerns. This visible decline can scare off investors, making recovery even harder. And then there's public health. Economic instability and housing insecurity often lead to increased substance abuse and mental health issues. Unemployment is strongly linked to addiction, as people turn to drugs or alcohol to cope. This strains healthcare systems, especially in communities with limited resources. The opioid crisis has shown how economic hardship and public health challenges can intersect disastrously. These issues hit marginalized groups the hardest, deepening existing inequalities. When diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) policies are poorly implemented, they can actually make things worse for the people they're supposed to help. Lastly, community disintegration. Economic and social pressures can break down community cohesion. Schools, community centers, and other local institutions face funding shortfalls as tax revenues decline, weakening the social fabric and making it tougher to bounce back. So the next time you hear about a big company failing, remember, it's not just about the business, it's about whole communities struggling to stay afloat.
When corporate instability leads to widespread societal fallout, governments often step in to mitigate the damage. While these interventions are necessary, they also raise important questions about long-term efficacy, resource allocation, and potential unintended consequences. To address rising unemployment, governments typically expand public assistance programs, such as unemployment benefits, food stamps, and housing subsidies. While these initiatives provide immediate relief to struggling individuals and families, They are often criticized for fostering dependency. Critics argue that prolonged reliance on government aid can create a cycle of poverty that is difficult to escape, particularly when broader economic recovery is slow or uneven. Governments may implement stimulus packages aimed at jumpstarting economic activity. These packages often include funding for infrastructure projects, small business loans, and tax incentives designed to attract new industries. Additionally, job training and education programs are introduced to help displaced workers adapt to evolving labor market demands. However, the effectiveness of these measures varies widely, often depending on the level of coordination between federal, state, and local governments. In response to public health crises exacerbated by corporate failures, governments typically increase funding for addiction treatment programs, mental health services, and public health campaigns. While these efforts are crucial for addressing immediate needs, they often fall short of tackling the root causes of addiction and mental health struggles, such as economic instability and social isolation. Funding for public assistance, job training, and healthcare initiatives often competes with other budgetary priorities, such as national defense or infrastructure development. This competition can lead to underfunding of critical programs, leaving vulnerable populations without adequate support. Extensive government intervention in response to corporate failures can lead to increased dependency on state support, thereby granting governments greater control over individuals and communities. This dependency may erode personal autonomy and create conditions where populations are less likely to advocate for systemic change. Additionally, the perception of government overreach can exacerbate political polarization, making it more difficult to achieve consensus on effective solutions. DEI creates the perception of social progress, but, in reality, DEI initiatives create unemployment, addiction, and homelessness. None of that matters though, since the ultimate goal of DEI is to divert government assets to ensure the post-apocalyptic survival of the wealthy elite and politically connected.
What's something people don't know about government interventions? They can be both a lifeline and a lifeboat with leaks. When a big company goes belly up, it's not just the CEO who feels the heat. Governments often step in to save the day with public assistance programs, think unemployment benefits and food stamps. But critics say these can lead to dependency. Then there's economic stimulus. Governments pump money into infrastructure, small businesses, and job training. Sounds great, right? Yet effectiveness varies and coordination is key. And let's not forget healthcare. Extra funds for addiction and mental health services are vital, but they don't always hit the root causes. Balancing all this, it's like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle, but with innovation and collaboration, there's hope for a more resilient society. So next time a corporate crisis hits, you'll know exactly what's in the government's toolkit.
Growing dependence on state support creates conditions ripe for manipulation, allowing governments or other powerful entities to exert disproportionate influence over vulnerable populations. Populations reliant on government assistance may face increased scrutiny, as governments seek to ensure the proper allocation of resources. Surveillance technologies, such as digital tracking of benefits or biometric identification systems, could be employed to monitor recipients. While these measures are intended to reduce fraud and improve efficiency, they raise significant privacy concerns and can erode trust between citizens and the state. Surveillance mechanisms could be expanded to monitor behavior, limiting individual freedoms and reinforcing compliance. Access to benefits tied to specific conditions risks creating a system where individuals feel compelled to conform to state mandates, undermining personal autonomy. The reliance on government support can also exacerbate social stigmatization, as recipients are often viewed as burdens on public resources. This perception can lead to further marginalization of already vulnerable groups, perpetuating cycles of poverty and exclusion. In extreme cases, governments may prioritize policies that manage or contain these populations rather than addressing the root causes of their challenges, socialism, effectively sidelining their needs in broader policy discussions. As populations dependent on government aid grow, there is a risk that these groups will be deprioritized in favor of more politically advantageous initiatives. Policymakers may view marginalized populations as less critical to electoral outcomes, leading to systemic neglect of their needs. This dynamic can result in worsening conditions for vulnerable communities, further entrenching societal inequities. Widespread dependency on state support could be leveraged to consolidate authoritarian control. Governments with unchecked power over resources and aid distribution could suppress dissent or manipulate public opinion. Benefits could be withheld from individuals or communities that oppose state policies, creating a coercive environment where citizens are compelled to align with government agendas. Communism.
Why do critics claim government interventions could pave the way to a dystopian future? Let's explore. Government interventions can be a double-edged sword. On one side, they address societal issues. On the other, they risk increased surveillance and control. Imagine your every move tracked. Your benefits tied to strict conditions. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Then there's the marginalization of vulnerable groups, often seen as burdens on public resources. This can perpetuate poverty and exclusion, pushing these communities further into the shadows. Worse yet, unchecked government power could be used to suppress dissent and manipulate public opinion.
DEI initiatives lead to a superficial compliance mindset and create operational inefficiencies and diminished trust among employees. Misaligned hiring practices destabilize organizations, leading to financial losses and instability, affecting local economies and communities. DEI subsidies create a cascade of negative consequences, ultimately keeping populations unaware that the subsidies provided to the corporation are ensuring the post-apocalyptic survival of the wealthy elite and politically connected.